or they try to break something.
Welcome to the Gray Zone.
Meet you downstairs in the bar and her. Your rolled up sleeves in your skull t-shirt. You say
The Gray Zone. A proactive and informative show that deals with politics, culture, and the events that shape our daily lives. Henry and Marcos cut through the bull and give the facts that can help to empower you into getting your head straight. We take you out of the twilight zone and into the gray zone. Now, here's your hosts, Henry and Marcos.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Szanto on the Gray Zone, and we're going to have a great show today. I have as my guest Daliah Saper, who is a intellectual property technology lawyer in Chicago. She's often on CNN, Fox, CNBC, New York Times, just basically everywhere. Really incredible lawyer. Welcome.
Hi, good morning, Michael. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. How's it going this morning?
It's a dreary Chicago morning. I'm not in Miami.
Yeah,
So
well,
it's
we're
as good as
probably
it's going
like
to get
75
here for now,
degrees
for the next few months.
What? Sorry?
It's as good as it's going to get for the next few months.
We're like
I wish you'd flown me into Miami so we could have this conversation on a beach somewhere.
Next time, we'll have you on the
Okay.
beach. So yeah, it's like 80 degrees or sunny 7. We're slumming it here. It's difficult.
It's very hard for you. I understand.
Yes, and so I followed your law practice over basically a decade now, and it's been very, very impressive. You've done intellectual property. You're like the legal guru on social networking. Tell us a little bit about your practice.
Sure. Well, Saper Law is an intellectual property, media, and business law firm. We're based out of Chicago, but we've helped clients around the world, mostly. We do the bread and butter legal work, but we get a lot of media attention, as you mentioned, for the cutting-edge social media and internet cases we've handled. For example, we have a lot of clients in the tech space, new business models utilizing new technologies, distribution channels using the internet, and all the associated privacy issues and intellectual property issues that come with being one of the pioneers in a new space.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. Have you had any really interesting cases that you think they'd like to discuss?
Oh, I've had so many interesting cases. The one I usually go to, which is it's the juiciest, is the case that I took to the Illinois Supreme Court a few years ago. And at the time, it was especially interesting because I'll back up. The case involved a woman who contacted me from California. She said that she's been the subject of internet defamation, and the defendant resides in Illinois. But as I talked to her, it turned out that this wasn't just a defamation case. It was really a catfishing case, a term that's since been coined that wasn't really around when I talked to her. But essentially, my client met a person on a chat room devoted to an HBO television show. That person then introduced her to a guy named Jesse. My client, Paula, and Jesse then proceeded to start chatting, and the relationship turned into a romantic one. And over the next year and a half, Paula and Jesse would communicate, and Jana, which was the woman who introduced them, was the intermediary. She would also be involved. Very long, very convoluted story short, it turned out that this woman, Jana, was really posing as this other person, Jesse, and manipulating Paula. So also getting gifts out of her and creating a lot of psychological damage to Paula. So we filed a lawsuit based on those actions. The core being it was a fraudulent misrepresentation to pretend to be somebody else on the internet, to manipulate another person, to extract money out of that person. And we also added all the other counts related to the fallout after my client discovered that it wasn't really, this guy Jesse, but Jana. And initially we we tried to file it in state courts here, and it kept getting dismissed because the courts just couldn't put their heads around what kind of a case this should be. Should you, is it Paula's fault for relying on some guy's statements that she'd never met? Or should there be some accountability on the part of the individual using the internet as a shield? So it got dismissed at the state level. We appealed it to the appellate court. The Illinois appellate court actually ruled in our favor. They remanded back to state court on the fraud count. So that was a big win. We got a lot of national attention and international attention for that. And then the case was appealed again to the Illinois Supreme Court, and ultimately we lost at that level. But it brought up some great issues. What is the line between just having fun online, acting out some sort of fantasy versus lying about who you are and really gravely impacting another person's life.
Now, does this at all, is there any federal jurisdiction involved with this type of issue or this particular case?
Well, not unless it implicates some sort of federal issue. So in this case, no. I mean, how do you craft a cause of action? It's one of the issues the courts had was this wasn't really a commercial case. Typically, fraud is applied in a commercial context, and we were able to squeak by on the appellate level by claiming that she actually extracted $10,000 worth of gifts from Paula. But there's no federal identity theft, civil identity theft statute. So until there is some uniform law across the board, you're going to have to litigate these things on a state-by-state basis.
But fraud is a federal crime, though. Isn't fraud laws kind of general?
If it's interstate fraud, it might be. It depends. Again, it's hard to get into the minutia in a quick radio show, but you could attempt it, but depending on what the courts, if they feel it properly fits within the categories, namely that it's typically a commercial count. It's got to have a commercial underlying basis. Like you've induced someone to do something, but for the fraudulent misrepresentation, they wouldn't.
That's definitely very interesting. So $10,000 worth of gifts, that's quite substantial damages, I'd say.
Yeah, over time. But, hey, I'm telling you, I thought we should have at least had the case proceed, but it got squashed from the very beginning. So we weren't even able to get past the complaint stage, really.
It's interesting, but you did get it up to the Illinois Supreme Court.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear how the judges wanted to. I mean, when you get up there, they usually have their minds made up. So when you start getting the questions asked, you can see where they're going.
And they were not. They didn't agree with your case.
Well, one of the judges asked me, so if I lie about myself on Match.com, should I get sued as well? And my response was,
it's a slippery slope, because then suddenly if a guy lies about his height or his ex-girlfriend, then it could be a fraud case if they had accepted it then.
That was part of their reasoning, although I think that every case requires some threshold analysis, and you can always, dismiss it. My position was let the case be heard. If it's frivolous, then you dismiss it, but the plaintiff should have an opportunity to bring it.
Because these were not harmless lies.
Right. Exactly. And that was my argument. This was a protracted, calculated fraud that took, that wasn't a quick post. It lasted over a year and a half.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complete elaborate fraud.
Yeah. So
it's interesting. Did the perpetrator of this scam have a criminal record of any sort? No. I mean, not that we know of. We know that she's done this in the past to other people, but because she's kind of in that murky, doing it more to manipulate people for her own personal satisfaction, she's so far gotten away with it. It sounds kind of like a psychopathic individual.
Oh, for sure. And then, you've got, and since then, you have a whole TV show devoted to catfishing, people living out separate lives online through some sort of, username or alternate characters they've created to play out their fantasies online.
Now, some of the issues you raise here, it actually occurs to me, reminds me of issues in bullying cases where fake accounts or other type of fraudulent, underhanded things are done online. And sometimes, tragically, teenagers will kill themselves. There's been a few cases, and prosecutors have gone after them, I believe, for criminal charges. But the underlying mechanism, or what the underlying crime in mechanics is similar, is basically getting on the web and doing fraudulent things to cause harm. I mean, and maybe I'm wrong because I'm not a lawyer, but isn't there a certain parallel in legal logic here?
Oh, well, absolutely. Since this case, and since some of the more publicized instances of kids committing suicide, a lot of states have been passing anti-bullying statutes. They're criminal statutes. So if your child's been the subject of bullying, it's typically difficult to get someone to prosecute these cases unless there's been some overt threat of physical harm. So parents, and we deal with cyberbullying, is another subset of our practice all the time. First, you have to take it up with the school, because schools are under various mandates to ensure that they have policies and procedures in place to create a safe learning environment, including having seminars and assemblies on what is and isn't bullying and how to avoid it. But we have a case where we actually defend a family whose child is now in high school, but when he was in 8th grade, he posted a single tweet saying, "Thanks, Jane Doe, for giving me herpes." And it was done from an anonymous account that was used by students of this, a Twitter account that was used by students of this school. And there were several kids who are making these statements. The plaintiff, the young girl who was mentioned in the tweet, has since filed a lawsuit, which has been dragging for the last year and a half. But another thing to consider is, especially in these bullying and defamation cases, is context. And should a family be subjected to protracted litigation over, what an 8th grade boy does on a whim at 2 in the morning on a Twitter account? And that's something we're going to have to work through as a society and look at the context and decide what are the damages, and did anyone ever take that tweet seriously? So on one hand, we're trying to figure out, how do you deal with online bullying? Yes, it's horrible. Can it
Sorry,
be
Daliah,
abused?
we're going to turn up the volume a little bit.
I'm sorry?
No, that's good. Okay, perfect. Go on. Sorry.
Okay, so basically, it's very fascinating because you're certainly sympathetic to the bullied person, but you're also something in our situation. These the parents we represent, along with this high school kid, they've spent thousands of dollars in defending the actions of a stupid one single tweet posted.
And
by
this
an 8th
triggered
grade
a
boy.
lawsuit. Just a single obnoxious Twitter triggered a lawsuit.
Oh, absolutely. And they've sued the parents for neglect. So that's something, your listeners can worry about, because if your child does something stupid, this set of parents is suing my clients and the child and under a negligence theory.
So
you
said
provided the computer to your child, and you should have known better.
Wait, so he said that the girl gave him herpes or had herpes?
Gave him herpes.
Okay. I mean, honestly, so that was bad on his part, but we all, even as adults, do stupid things every once in a while.
Right. And so with defamation cases, context is very important. There's a case involving Evel Knievel where he was called a pimp by ESPN magazine, and he took it very seriously. He said, "You can't call me a pimp. It's very offensive to me." And the court ruled that this actually, in context, that statement was a compliment.
It often is a compliment.
Yeah.
So I mean, you pimped out your car, for God's sake.
Right.
I mean, you could argue it shouldn't be a compliment, but it often is. It's interesting.
It is very interesting. So a lot of times we're dicing the meaning of words, whether they have an innocent construction, what was the forum that the statement was made in, who made the statement, what was the credibility of the statement, and that's a big part of our practice. And context since it is an element of the analysis in light of the internet, we spend a lot of time dissecting whether this website is credible, whether this website is a parody site. Should someone reading a Twitter post actually believe it to be true? And you run up against the challenges of, a court system that's obviously behind when it comes to new technologies and new websites.
I mean,
And,
you know,
and
it's interesting when you sit at a table with 10 people and you start drinking wine, people say things that are kind of jokes, and sometimes you just take it as jokes. But if you were to twist it in your own mind or get paranoid, you'd be like, oh, so-and-so just said. Like, the number of offensive things that your friends or your colleagues are going to say at a lunchroom table at some point is limitless, right?
Well, absolutely. The problem, of course, is if you write or make that post on the internet, it depends where it can go and how it can be construed, and it's not something made in passing. It can show up in search results forever and ever. Which, actually speaking, since this is a business show in some respects, one of the other things we handle on a regular basis, in the same vein, is the Yelp reviews and rip-off report reviews, where business owners will call us in a panic because a competitor or a rogue employee or a very disgruntled customer has taken their beef online and is starting to attack their business using these various forums to write really negative reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to go through the same analysis. Well, does the statement contain facts, or is it just an opinion?
Have you gotten some traction on fighting disgruntled employees who, let's say, just make up something nasty about their former employers and post it online in a deceptive way, maybe pretending to be a customer?
Have we had cases like that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And it's like there's so many new forums where employees can write reviews and make statements, either as themselves anonymously, like Glassdoor.com as a site, or under a pseudonym on a site like Ripoff Report, which is notorious for not removing anything. It's a very, very difficult to redact the content on Ripoff Report and get it removed from Google search results. It requires either an arbitration proceeding that Ripoff Report is set up, or going through the court system to get an order requiring the removal.
Okay, so if somebody gets fired and then they pretend to be a customer and client and they make up a story, could you then just pursue a slander case?
You certainly can. The challenge is it's not so easy to pinpoint who made the statement. So, for example, if you're on Ripoff Report and Bob XYZ, or forget Bob, XYZA1 writes the post, how do you sue the employee? How do you know who did it? So there's online platforms and service providers are mandated by something called the Stored Communications Act to protect your information. And only pursuant to a court order can they disclose your basic subscriber information. So if, let's say, someone is posting something about you on a Facebook page, but you're not friends with that person, you can't subpoena Facebook and get the content of that Facebook account. All you can do is subpoena Facebook and say, it's my understanding that at this account there are statements being made about me. I'd like to know who's the owner of that account. And that requires a whole, multiple legal pleadings to get to that stage. And then once Facebook or YouTube or whatever the platform is gives you the basic subscriber information, at that point, then you have to go and sue the individual. So it requires this whole extra step that you wouldn't have if you knew, hey, ex-employee Bob is bad-mouthing us to a competitor, we're going to sue him.
Now, the law that you mentioned that allows you to find out the owner but protects the contents of the account, is that a federal law?
That is a federal law, yeah.
But do you then go into federal court or state court? I'm just curious.
Both. Depends what the cause of action is. If it's a defamation or slander issue, defamation cases are state-based. So you have to sue either where you think the defendant resides, but more typically where the brunt of the harm was felt, and that's where the plaintiff resides.
So if you get an inkling that Bob, who lives in Miami Beach, Florida, is defaming a Chicago-based client, but he's doing it from Florida, and he does it with ABCDE 15 account at yahoo.com, would you then file the case in Florida or Illinois?
If it was me and I know where the plaintiff lives, it's a Chicago-based company, I'd file it in Illinois. And then once I figure out who it is, I can keep the case here or decide to transfer it to Florida.
And do you find that there's significant state variations in these cases, or it typically doesn't matter?
it depends. Yeah, it's hard to say because I really only practice defamation in Illinois. But the general analysis is the same in all cases. That it was a false statement of fact that was not privileged, and it was disseminated to multiple people.
And by the way, speaking of kind of these privacy and account issues, we got into a little bit about how when something gets said about you online, it can basically stay there forever. What do you make of the European Union law right to be remembered? I know it's causing Google and other American website companies issues right now.
I like the idea. I think it's difficult to manage, but it is way too hard in the United States to remove content that is defamatory. I can tell you that the reality is a lot of these websites are hosted in Korea or these offshore places. So if you are unfortunate, you're the victim of a bad review, you should be able to go to search engines after this, presenting a court order to get it removed. I don't know if you want to open the floodgates to them monitoring the entire internet, because I think that the difficulty with the right to be forgotten statutes in Europe is that it requires a massive administrative oversight by these search engines and other platforms, which may stifle business and make it, procedurally difficult to actually implement.
Okay, so it's a really, really difficult thing to implement, but in practice, if you're pursuing, like trying to get something off the web today, the server might be in South Korea, and it might require you to go to a South Korean court to try to get it off.
Yeah, well, and even that, it's more about just getting it delinked. So if there's terrible content out there, good luck taking it down. The best bet is to make it not show up when someone searches you, because really that's the damage. No one's really going to find, xyz.com/Korea, without searching for your name.
And then there's so Google, because everyone's going to Google could just hide it, and then nobody would find it.
Yeah, would de-index it, meaning it would not show up when I search Daliah Saper's name. That link may exist on the internet, but no one will ever find it.
Now, there's a wonderful site, helpful, but it could, I guess it could also be destructive, called the Wayback Machine, which is archive.org.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fine. Like I said, so what we do is if we're successful in getting a court order, what we then we create a list of URLs that we'd like Google to de-index, and sometimes they comply and sometimes they don't. And remember, these platforms are not subject to any court order. The court order is always received against the defendant. So the defendant, hey, your post was defamatory, it needs to be removed. Technically, Google doesn't have to do anything. They're not the defendant. They usually comply if you get a court order, but it's not 100%.
Now, one of the issues that's also involving web servers and is going international is the U.S. Patriot Act. I don't know if you've encountered any issues related to that.
I haven't really, but all of those issues go into the subject matter of what is and is not kept private and when it can be, subpoenaed or revealed and under what circumstances.
One of the issues I found kind of interesting with the Patriot Act is there was a question of if you have a telephone call in Pakistan, you made me think of this, or email sent in Pakistan, but it goes through American servers. Is it a American phone call or a Pakistani phone call? And the NSA and FBI and CIA were getting frustrated because the two telephones were in Pakistan, but it was going through a router and switch in the United States. And so the communications have become so international, it blurs the distinction between domestic and international calls.
Well, I'm not an expert on the Patriot Act, but I can tell you that generally, like I said, the platform providers and the utilities, essentially like a phone company is, they have to safeguard your information and your activities. So the government and even a private corporation, depending on what tools they use, can get that information if there's a real need or they demonstrate that it's a matter of national security, or in the case of litigation, it's very important for subject to blah 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 all these conditions. That information can be subpoenaed.
Now I saw that I saw that Illinois has passed a new crowdfunding act. If the investors and investments, and we have one too in Florida, and it's in many states, if both the investors and the company are within Florida, it allows for a new type of crowdfunding.
Okay, so we're transitioning. Yeah, that's look. There's new models with securities, like regulations are being laxed. Clients come to us and they ask what's the best way to raise money now, and now we add crowdfunding as another option. The intricacies of investments will also implicate different state laws as well, depending on where and how you're soliciting that kind of money. And we always explain the difference between, like a Kickstarter and a crowdfunding site that's you're just basically gifting away something versus giving away a piece of the company. So that's a little hard to get into the minutia in a quick radio call as well, and I hesitate to give advice as to
I know that Kickstarter, as you said, you're kind of donating almost like there's no obligation, but it kind of popularized the idea of crowdfunding, Kickstarter, I would say.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting. What are some of the other big issues with your clients today? Oh, okay. So we lost her. We'll probably have her back in within a couple minutes. So the Kickstarter issue is okay. So yeah, Daliah's back. That's great. What are some of the other big issues with your clients? Okay, so we're going to go into the break in about 6 minutes. We are having on the show we're having Daliah Saper on. She is an expert of technology and intellectual property. And we were talking about a number of issues, including the right to be forgotten and privacy. And as well as we got into a little bit about crowdsourcing. Yeah. And anyway, it's definitely always exciting to have somebody who's, always being on Fox and CNN. And so definitely very, very top lawyer in Chicago. Everything really has changed in terms of technology since the first web browsers in 1994. And I think Daliah's back. Welcome back.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. I was just talking away, and then I realized no one was listening to me.
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So we were talking, what are some of the other issues? I think the last question I asked you, what are some of the other big issues with your clients?
A big one is really the intellectual property protection and management for a lot of companies. I get a lot of questions about what is and is not trademarkable, what is and is not shareable, if it's copyrighted content. So we spend a lot of time, especially with companies who are launching advertising campaigns or sweepstakes and contests. We sit down and say, all right, well, what are your brands? Are they properly trademarked? What are you doing in the domain name space? Have you considered purchasing the new GTLD's, generic top-level domain names? So I don't know if you know this, Michael, but ICANN and the body that governs the internet, so to speak, there's a whole new ecosystem for domain names. Now it's not just .com or .org.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
but
clients
I
can
rarely
buy
go to anything
.food,
but .com. But you
cook,
really only see
lawyer.
.com and .net or .us.
I mean, right. So there's been the less popular URLs, domain names around, but now there's new ones, and different organizations have bid to get them. It's been a whole process. But clients now, if they're launching a campaign, if they're the food industry, they might want to have, chefbob.food as opposed to .com. And it opens up new trademark issues because now squatters can squat on .food versus the .com, and the analysis is the same.
Well, I got to tell you two things. I don't think I had a big enough breakfast. This whole .food domain name thing is making me hungry. And the second thing is I definitely follow that issue a certain amount, but I haven't really thought about it a lot because you actually don't see a lot of these sites. But I think it would be funny to have a Michael J. Santo .food just to have something
There you go.
different.
Well, they're being launched in stages, so you can't, there's certain, you can try to get them in what's called the sunrise period. And again, all these issues are a little hard to get into detail in a quick radio call. But for your listeners, it's important to note that there are new generic top-level domain names coming out, generic being like food or .lawyer, for example. And you may want to consider buying some of those names both as a marketing tool and also as a defensive measure so people don't squat on your domain names like they used to back when.
So it's basically opened up a new front against the squatters.
There's just a new real estate now. There's new online real estate that's been opened up. New developments.
And it should be Daliah.awesomelawyer, right?
Exactly, or .ceo, or .buzz, or what else do we have?
I don't know, .gorgeous.
Club it's a very popular one now.
Which one?
.club.
Oh, .club, yeah. I still remember, do you remember Crowbar in Chicago?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, we go back. See, I'm a Chicagoan still at heart.
That is really an old school reference. So, yeah, Crowbar.club, for example.
Or Karma.
Chess.
Karma's
Club.
older, if you remember Karma in Chicago.
Yeah, all of those places. So, it's an interesting new development. We've helped some clients get domain names before they're released to the general public, negotiate those kind of contracts. We deal with, like I said, we just wrote it. I write regularly for business.com. We wrote an article about trademarking a hashtag. And that was a very popular article because, if you launch...
Daliah, we're going to take a very, very short break, and we'll be back to you in about a minute and a half.
Okay, sounds good.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back with The Gray Zone here on 880 AM The Biz.
880 The Biz. Time saver traffic.
In Miami-Dade, still seeing heavy volume on the Palmetto northbound between 37th Avenue, that's Douglas Road, and the Florida Turnpike, 7th Avenue. On the Dolphin, stop and go eastbound between the Turnpike and Lejeune Road. And as we go up to Davie right now in Broward, stop and go on 595 eastbound between the Sawgrass and 441 at State Road 7. Also, it's going to be slow on 75 southbound between Miramar Parkway and Miami Gardens Drive. For more traffic, follow us on Twitter at Total Traffic MIA.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. U.S. stock index futures are climbing ahead of the opening bell, tracking oil and commodity-fueled gains in European markets. And after the S&P 500 index snapped its longest winning streak this year, crude oil this morning now up 1.1% at just over $49 a barrel. SAB Miller is again saying no to a third acquisition offer from rival Anheuser-Busch InBev, which bid $104 billion. SAB Miller says that still very substantially undervalues the company. If you're driving a Volkswagen diesel vehicle with a rigged emissions system, then you can probably expect to hear in January about a recall, says VW's new CEO, speaking to German media. He says most cars will probably only need software reprogramming that can be done locally, but some engines will need more complicated repairs that will need to be done at special workshops. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
You landed on 880 The Biz, South Florida's only business talk station. 880 The Biz, where money talks.
Or they try to something.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Michael Szanto in the Gray Zone. We have Daliah Saper, really top intellectual property, social networking lawyer from Chicago. Welcome back, Daliah.
Thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Have you dealt a lot with patent trolls, or that's not really a big issue in your practice?
I haven't dealt with patent trolls because I'm not a patent attorney, but what I have dealt with are copyright trolls, which mirrored the tactics often used by patent trolls. For example, we handle a high volume of cases involving the BitTorrent protocol, where actually more recent, in the last couple of years, it was pornography production companies suing. They would be seeding the BitTorrent files and then catching via IP address people who were sharing and or downloading that content. And that's premised on copyright laws, like you can't, share a movie, whether it's pornography or a mainstream movie.
Right.
And now it is more independent films, like the Dallas Buyer Club Hurt Locker and Dallas Buyers Club are like examples of two movies that are being heavily enforced and we're defending. And we kind of call them trolls because they're suing a lot of, it's like a reverse class action. They're suing a lot of people at the same time. And usually it's based on nothing more than an IP address, and they get the wrong person. And we either negotiate a settlement or we try to defend that individual by stating, hey, you've got the wrong guy. I have an open wireless network. It could have been anybody that was visiting me on such and such date. The challenge being they're trolls because they offer a settlement number that's typically less than the cost of defense. And clients have to make that tough decision. Do I pay the settlement fee and make it go away even if I know I didn't do anything wrong, versus spend tens of thousands of dollars to litigate something?
Oh, so I guess I didn't fully realize like the mechanism of trolls. Come to think of it, I kind of, on the technology patent side, a company that writes a patent of something that they can't really practically implement. But part of the strategy of the trademark trolls is that almost like extortion, pay up or face a more expensive lawsuit.
Yeah, copyright trolls. Yeah, exactly. And look, there are some instances where the plaintiffs have a valid claim. Yes, I do believe in copyright laws, and I do believe in enforcing those copyrights. What I find distasteful is the mechanism used in these cases. And we see a lot of people cast in that net that really aren't liable for the content being downloaded or shared or, in legal terms, infringed on.
Now, I'm here in Miami. Our radio station's in Miami, obviously, and there's a lot of exciting stuff going on here, building huge skyscrapers. Some of the biggest projects in the country, like Brickell City Center, I always talk about, largest new construction in the South. Another tower that's going to be the largest all-residential tower outside of New York. Another one that's going to be the tallest building outside Chicago, Philadelphia, New York. So a lot of exciting things going on. And one of the aspirations for Miami, like Chicago, is to be a technology center. But I've noticed that Chicago has a pretty big Google facility. Groupon's headquartered there. Grubhub, I'm getting hungry again. So like, what are you guys doing right, and what can we learn from Chicago? And what are your...
What a good question. I think what Chicago's done right is create like a ecosystem in a very concentrated place. I'd say that my office is in River North. I think a lot of West Loop and River North tend to be where all the tech companies are congregating for the most part, and we're slowly achieving critical mass. 1871, if you're familiar, I think led the way when it was opened a couple years ago, incubating and housing like Techstars and Code Academy, now Starter League. Those were some bigger organizations, I'd say, that are really fostering the community, and there's just a lot of activity going on. Whereas before it was kind of a wasteland. I mean, that's a little bit of a strong comment, but there weren't a lot of service providers or people savvy enough to support the ecosystem. And I think now with the concentration of people in the space, you're seeing more and more, and then that's attracting others in the tech space to come and build their businesses here.
Now, a related issue, and this might be outside of your practice, but it's kind of interesting. I know that in Chicago, the city, University of Chicago, Northwestern, and UIC are interested in developing nanotechnology. And here in Miami, University of Miami has kind of gone into that a little bit as far as life sciences. So it's another interesting kind of development.
Yeah, well, I'm more focused on all things digital, but certainly, yes, the nanotech and science is another biotech really in Illinois is certainly further developing as well. Illinois Science and Technology Institute, for example, is a client of mine, and we help them with their IP issues. But
wait, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name. Which was the client?
Illinois Science and Technology.
Oh, where are they based in the city of Chicago?
No, they're in the outlying suburbs, but close enough. They have different facilities, but Chicago's great. You should come back, except for that weather problem. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, I always miss you guys. But we have sun. We have sun. We have beaches. We have better mojitos.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, I'll give you those.
Yeah, and you're a regular participant in South by Southwest in Austin, Texas.
Yes, I've been going the last, I think, 4 or 5 years.
Do you think everyone should go?
Depends. It depends if you know how to navigate an event like that. Typically, it can be very overwhelming if you don't have a strategy. And at the same time, it's also great not to have a strategy at all. Some of my best connections have been made literally walking the streets of South by Southwest and bumping into people and just striking up a conversation. So depending on what industry you're in, I think it's a really fun event and a lot of interesting people, again, congregating in one location.
South by Southwest is a place you could run into an old friend who's an amazing lawyer from Chicago.
That's exactly right. Or really, like I sat next to someone in a coffee shop at South by Southwest that turned out to be a client that I've had a long relationship with, and I've just met a lot of great people. But it can also be a big waste of time if you're just there, hanging out. If you can walk away and not achieve anything if you're not somewhat calculated about what you intend to do with your time down there.
Well, some of the sessions can be very, very informative.
Well, that of course. I mean, that's the case. For me though, any conference, it's not really about the sessions. It's more about the events surrounding those sessions.
The networking.
Yeah, I think it's about the connections made at these events as opposed to the information. Because let's be honest, most of the information you can get in any session, you can get elsewhere.
Online.
Yeah,
or
online,
trade
you
journals.
you can access almost anything if you need to. It's more about who's giving that presentation and who does that person know that you
Now,
should
some of the listeners might not know about South by Southwest, and it's a little confusing because it's really a whole bunch of things. It's a business conference, but it's also a set of conferences. So it's like all these unrelated things almost.
Well, that's true. So South by Southwest is typically divided into the interactive portion, the film portion, and the music portion. Typically the interactive and film portions are in the beginning, and then the music festival is towards the end. I end up doing only like a day of overlap, but for the most part, I go for the film and the interactive portion. I have clients who are filmmakers, and they usually have screenings down there, and then I have clients who have new apps that they want to launch. And so for me, I'm there for that portion as opposed to the music portion more heavily.
So that's what makes it confusing, because it's like a conference that is very much a business conference, and then it becomes like the equivalent of Lollapalooza.
Yeah, it's true. And it's expanded over time. I mean, I think I went to Burning Man this year, and I think Burning Man's going to become the new South by Southwest in some ways.
With technology, too?
Well, there's a lot of San Francisco and West Coast participants, and it's definitely 100% different format and a different concept, but it's attracting some of the same people, I think, that go to South by Southwest.
Well, you're so wired into a lot of, actually, culture, clearly, because you went to Burning Man. So it's interesting then to look at, in Chicago you have Lollapalooza, and then in Miami you have Ultra Music Festival, and World Music Festival is huge.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, I think it goes back to my comment beginning, that there's so many new ways to distribute content. And, you can't replace that live experience, but what we're doing with technology is making it easier for people to cross the country to come together and have those experiences, distribute content differently, bring people together. This radio interview will be disseminated, everywhere. Someone in Bangkok can listen to this interview if they want. So I think we're in an interesting time, and I think it's for me, it's a lot of fun to live vicariously through some of my clients to see how they actually are able to launch those business models and how successful those business models will be.
And since we're talking about the global web, anyone can listen to the show live at 9 a.m. Eastern Time or 9 p.m. So this show will repeat 9 p.m. tonight, and anyone around the world can listen to it, either on the radio station website or also iHeartRadio, which is really amazing. Now, I feel that the best, I kind of think, and it sounds silly, that the best networking software or website today is Facebook, because it tells when your colleagues or friends are in the same place as you.
Oh, well, yeah. For now, Facebook's kept its place in the social media landscape. But, there's so many new apps that allow you to do that, too. But I still think Facebook is a very valuable tool. I use it heavily. We're getting some fragmentation depending on, what the ultimate use is. Whether it's like the Instagrams or the Pinterests or the Snapchats. but I think everyone still has some connection to Facebook, and I actually am able to contact and create a network and keep in touch with that network via Facebook.
I mean,
More
you could
easily
find
than I do
another
with the
website
other
that you like
platforms.
better, but if other people are not constantly on it, it's not going to work as well as Facebook.
Right, I agree. You know, I think people's inboxes are still probably the place where they get the most immediate information. But if you want to target someone where they're casually engaging, that a platform like Facebook is really a good one.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Yeah, so any other interesting cases you'd like to share with us?
No, I just think that what I tell all business owners who come to me is let's go through our checklist of issues you need to be concerned about. Number one, do you have all your contracts in place, especially as they relate to affiliates and distributors who are promoting you online? Do you have your IP in place? Do you have your trademarks and copyrights registered? Do you know when you shouldn't be copying and distributing other people's content? Have you considered buying up new domain names to protect your brand? Have you been following various state and social media platforms' rules, regulations when coming up with a contest? Are you complying with the FTC disclosure guidelines when you're promoting other people's products or having bloggers write about, or influencers promote your product? What else we talk about?
So I want to also ask you, you've just made an incredible, you have an incredible presence on the media like CNN, Fox, CNBC, New York Times. How do you do it?
I try to, it's a combination of having cases that they want to cover and also getting in with the various networks. Once you've been on a couple times, they're kind of on your roster, and then they call you. Once you've established yourself as kind of a subject matter expert, it's easier for them to call the same person than to try to scramble and find a new expert. So for me, it's kind of it's been over time creating those connections and then just maintaining them.
That's very, very neat. It's always exciting to see, the people I know on various networks. And now, is it more fun?
It is a lot of fun. I mean, it actually keeps me abreast of topics I maybe wouldn't be, because they'll call me that morning and be like, "Did you know that this is happening? I need you to talk about it in 2 hours." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, sure." And then it's really, really brand new news. And for me, the benefit isn't necessarily being on the news. It's from forcing me to be completely up to date on some of the tech and social media issues that arise.
What are some of the most interesting issues you've talked on television about?
Oh, my goodness. Sexting, the privacy issues. What else? The Ashley Madison hack was the most recent one. They're all a blur right now, but
oh yeah, that Ashley Madison thing is crazy.
Yeah, and it's not the first time a big site's been hacked, but this one was juicy because obviously the contents were pretty.
And
damaging.
I think they said there was a suicide in Canada that they thought was linked to that.
Probably. I mean, right? It's yeah.
And by the way, speaking of tech issues in the news, what the heck was Hillary Clinton thinking about with that server?
Yes, I mean, all of those issues, right? I like to hesitate from commenting on that stuff, but yeah, it's fun to talk about. It's fun to keep in touch. Be up to date on all of those issues. Like, technology impacts everything we do. And it's endless what we can discuss relating to.
Well, so I wasn't trying to make a very political statement. I think there's also sometimes a generational gap. And when you're dealing with potentially CEOs or high-ranking people and they're in their 60s, they sometimes don't have the same intuitive grasp.
Oh, yeah. But, we all get comfortable, right? Whether it's a messenger or, anything that's, unless you're using Snapchat, which is why I think it's such a popular tool, everything you communicate is preserved in some capacity. So it's easy to forget who can look at what you're writing.
I don't use Snapchat. Should I?
It has a limit. It has an appeal depending on what you want to use it for. It is gaining a lot of traction. So, if nothing else, it's good to be familiar with the platform. I use it to communicate with certain people, and it's more of a novelty and fun for me. But advertisers are flocking to Snapchat. So it's, from a business perspective, something you should consider depending on who your target market is.
It seems like kind of a double-edged sword because you don't want to be like some prosecuting attorney with your friends and colleagues, but on the other hand, just in silly ways, you kind of want somebody to know like what happened, and if somebody said, "Well, I didn't say this 2 days ago," you kind of want to say, "Yes, you did," just so that they know that you're not going crazy.
Well, then you decide which platform you're going to use that day. Is it going to be a text message, an email, or a Snapchat?
I mean, it's like a harmless thing. I think 95% of the time it's a harmless thing. Somebody just doesn't remember telling you something. It's not that they're trying to cover up, but it gets really frustrating if you can't say, well, but this is why I did it, That's just me, I guess.
Well, maybe you should change those kind of people that are around you. But no, I agree. But that's what I'm saying. People, you don't have to be on one platform exclusively. Like I'll use Snapchat for certain communication. I'll use Instagram for others. I'll be on Twitter for, short news headings. I'll be on Facebook for more substantive connections.
What do you think about LinkedIn?
And LinkedIn, I mean, everyone should have a LinkedIn profile if they're at all in the corporate space, even if they're not using it actively. It's your online resume. So I think it's important to have a very developed LinkedIn profile.
Oh, because it's your online resume. All the recruiters see it. It goes into details.
The recruiters, I've had people contact me who were searching for a lawyer, and they went to LinkedIn as opposed to the web to search.
But it's a kind of funny thing with LinkedIn, and a few years ago is kind of bigger, but people would say, okay, I'm going to add you on LinkedIn. And then they add you on LinkedIn, and from my perspective, sometimes it's like, okay, so we're LinkedIn contacts, and then it seems to die. Like, okay, so we're LinkedIn contacts with, and I know Facebook, began with college students and high school students, so people felt silly about using it for their professional context, but at least you interact with the people. You can send an invite to a conference. That's a Facebook invite. I haven't really seen that. So LinkedIn doesn't seem very dynamic in a practical way.
Yeah, and I would agree, and that's why since I'm not actively seeking, clients or, I don't really use it, but I am very, I know others, depending on what kind of business you're in, or if you're a recruiter, or if you're trying to target certain people, I know that my profile gets viewed, and like I said, I think it has a lot of searchable functions and features that are appealing to, again, a certain subset. So just have a presence if for no other reason, so that somebody else doesn't kind of take over your online real estate.
Yeah, and also it can look bad if you don't have a presence. It's kind of one of those eyes to dots.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you're familiar, so you don't want to be clueless about something that still a lot of people are on. We are definitely going to have you back in the show if you're available.
Thank you. I'd love to come back.
I love it as well. And I know you said you have like a 10 a.m. meeting actually to get to, 9 a.m. your time.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't want to keep you, but we'll have you back. I'm looking forward to having you back. Thank you for going over so many issues, giving so many incredible insights.
You're very welcome. Let me know when we can do it again.
Yes, definitely. We will have you again. Have a great morning,
Michael.
and talk to you very soon.
Thanks. You too.
Okay, so everyone, that was Daliah Saper. She is a top technology lawyer in Chicago. You're probably going to see her on CNN or Fox or CNBC soon. She's definitely a subject matter expert on many different issues. She's an old friend going back more than 10 years because, of course, as you guys know or probably know by now, I am from Chicago. I've lived in Miami for 4.5 years. We live in such a changing, dynamic, exciting world. The first web browsers really came out in 1994 when I was a freshman at Northwestern. I downloaded them. It was first Mosaic, which came from the University of Illinois at their National Supercomputer Center, which developed a lot of key internet software, including Eudora, which is an email program. Then came out Netscape, which had that summer had a multi-billion-dollar IPO. It was actually the first of the dot-com IPOs, and that Netscape IPO was very, very exciting. Microsoft was able to come out with a competing web browser, which was called Internet Explorer. We still have Internet Explorer. The team that ran the first Internet Explorer team was led by Ben Slivka, somebody I personally know. I've met him for lunch a couple times. He's a Northwestern grad. He's very involved at Northwestern. He's on the board of trustees at Northwestern. There's a dorm named after him at Northwestern, engineering dorm. Little Ben Slifka trivia. He worked briefly in the facility in Boca Raton, working with IBM and OS2 because there was a little bit of collaboration on OS2, even though Microsoft ultimately went with Windows overwhelmingly or entirely. It created a bitter rift actually between IBM and Microsoft because IBM PCs, which created the which led to IBM compatibles, which were clones of IBM PCs, which were originally designed primarily to work with IBM servers and mainframes, which were dominant in the corporate space. The rift occurred because Microsoft and IBM were longtime partners, and Microsoft, rather than supporting OS2, ultimately just went exclusively with Windows. There's an interesting book, highly critical of Microsoft. I hope Microsoft people forgive me for mentioning it, called Showstopper, that covers Windows NT, Windows, and OS2. Kind of an interesting issue. So there was the Netscape IPO. I was actually going to mention another. Oh, so the interesting issue with the Clinton administration, when it pursued an antitrust case against Microsoft, their argument focused in on the integration of Internet Explorer into Windows. I thought that was a poor case to choose because I feel that internet web browsers are a logical extension of a operating system's file system, because it's logical and a great enhancement to the consumer to be able to access files on your computer and around the world in the same manner. So I felt the way they actually integrated the web browser into Windows made sense and benefited consumers. But I mean, in the long run, we still have independent web browsers on servers, on PCs, and I think that's because of that lawsuit pursued by the Department of Justice and the way they chose to pursue it. I think there were other issues like service packs breaking Apple QuickTime, which might have been stronger cases. But anyway, QuickTime, iTunes flourished on Windows machines anyway, helping iPods and iPhones to take off. So we live in a very dynamic world. The iPhone has been particularly revolutionary. It launched a whole new category of smartphones and tablets. And that's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., and the show will repeat 9 p.m. Have a wonderful morning, everyone.
Or they try to
Thank you for tuning in to The Gray Zone, where you enter a zombie and you leave awake. Tune in tomorrow, same time, same place, right here on 880 AM The Biz, starting at 9 a.m., Monday through Fridays, because almost nothing is black or white. The Gray Zone.